Cool. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Artsy HQ here in New York. My name is Mark Rosen. I manage all of Artsy's social media presence. And I'm joined today by my good friends, Susi Kenna, who's the director of social media for the PR and marketing firm Fitz & Co., and Gregory Gestner, who is the marketing communications manager at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. So we'll get to know everyone a little bit more here in a minute. But first, I thought we should talk a little bit about why Artsy is doing this and what we're working on in terms of social media. So for those who maybe are a little bit less familiar with Artsy, Artsy is sort of an online destination for the art world. So we partner as a company, and I therefore work closely as our sort of social media voice with a wide variety of galleries, museums, fairs, auctions, etc., to bring them online. Now, considering that social media is a huge way in which people engage with the world online and technology specifically, we are working on developing more and more tools and resources for the art world specific to social media, because there really aren't that many out there. This is one of them. I'll talk about other ones that are coming up and in the works at the end of the webinar, so stay tuned for that. So that's why we decided to do this. I'll give you an idea of what we have in store for you today, and then I'll shut up and we can start talking. So we'll spend the first 40 or so minutes talking about general best practices in social media, generally and specific to different kinds of accounts, because it seems like we have a variety of people tuning in today. And then we'll end in the last 15 to 20 minutes with a Q&A from you. So please chat us your questions as things go on, and we'll choose all that we can answer to answer. So we'll do Q&A for the last 15 to 20 minutes and take it from there. So I will end my soapbox speech now and have our sort of panelists introduce themselves a little bit. So yeah, if you don't mind telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and I guess more specifically, things you've learned managing social media for the time that you have, if there have been any major takeaways, and then we can talk about more specific best practices.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sure. So
first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Gestner. I work at Cooper Hewitt. I'm the communications and marketing manager there. I've been there for about a year. I came from a publishing editorial background, as well as a media production. And I manage all of the social media channels. Our top three are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, obviously. And I also do some other traditional PR work for our educational programs, public programs, as well as some select exhibitions, like our Pixar exhibition opening in October. So, I mean, I started right before the museum. We were ramping up for the reopening in December of 2014. So I was at a really pivotal time at the museum where it had been closed for 3 years. So there was a lot of talk about, you know, how are we going to relaunch our brand? What is our brand? Who is our audience? So just in general, I think we really sat down and looked at those big questions and mapped out exactly like who we are speaking to and what are the goals to raise the museum as a leader in design, a design authority. So I don't know if you want me to talk about like some specific things we did, or
I think let's hear from Susi first, and okay. Then yeah, there's so many projects we've worked on. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. So cool.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here. My name is Susi Kenna. I am the director of social media at Fitz & Co. For those who may not know, Fitz & Co. is a global PR and marketing firm which specializes in media relations, social media, events, audience development for leaders in art and culture. And over the roughly 3 years that I've been there, I've had the opportunity to work on some really exciting social media initiatives for art fair clients such as Art Basel, the ADA Art Show, Paris Photo Los Angeles, as well as art and design galleries such as Scarsdale and Chime & Reed and R & Company, museums, cultural institutions such as the Byler Foundation, Storm King Art Center, and like it just runs the gamut. So it's been really exciting. And I also am into nail art.
Yeah.
That's my other claim to fame. Which
Wish we could zoom in.
Yes,
but, yeah.
my favorite emoji is.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that as well. Okay.
Just a fun fact.
Yeah,
It's of
favorite
course
emoji.
then the hand, the hot pink nails.
Fair enough. Makes perfect sense. Favorite emoji.
I think it'd have to be the flamenco dancer, just
That's a
because
good
it
one.
So good
just
one.
says so much.
Where's the taco emoji? That's always the conversation. I guess finally, I'm Mark. Again, manage social media for Artsy. I've been at Artsy for just over a year now, which in Artsy terms is almost a lifetime because we're still a relatively young company. And I came to Artsy from a museum education background. My MA is in museology, museum studies, focusing on museum education, but I've always been interested in how social media can be an educational resource, specifically an informal educational resource. So came to Artsy. Because Artsy represents such a vast variety of our world stakeholders, I think one of the unique challenges for me is representing all of them in one, I guess, feed. If we're talking about Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, representing all of what we have going on in Artsy in one place. It definitely has its unique challenges and opportunities. My favorite emoji would have to be the mustache guy because he's my twin. That's always been the case. I think if not that, I maybe would go flamenco, but depends on the day. Great. Well, thanks for that. I guess let's jump in and give our viewers some specific takeaways. So if we're talking about best practices in the art world at large, so if you're a museum, a gallery, a fair, auction house, individual, what have you, just in general, if you're on Instagram, let's stick to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for now. We maybe can bring other things up at the end, but if you're on any of those platforms, what do you feel are some very general best practices?
I think my number one is being able to speak the language. So it's not just understanding that, you press this button to post, or you press this button to upload a photo, or a tweet is 140 characters, or an Instagram could be square or landscape or portrait, but it's understanding what is relevant to who you're talking to and to your audience and to the people that you are engaged with on a daily basis.
Yep. I think to piggyback on that too, it's speaking the language that's unique to each platform. Mm-hmm. There are certain, a Facebook caption can be a number of different things, an Instagram image. I've always said, I think image quality is such a huge part of success on major. And yet, I think relatively unfortunately in the art world, you don't see that many accounts. I think it's because there's so few resources in the art world for social media. I'd love to see the art world at large invest more in social, but the image quality often is not as high as you see in other kinds of industries that are so popular on social.
But image quality is a funny word, and I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too, because image quality isn't just, it's high res, it's not blurry, it's this, it's that, does it make sense within the confines of that place where it is being posted, and does it give you the perspective that you would not, like, different than what you put on the website, or what you put in the newsletter, or what you put in an advertisement, for example. Like, you can't take those things and make them work on social media every time. It's possible, but it's better when you think about what does social media need, and then you approach the image from that perspective.
Totally, 100%. Greg?
I totally agree. I mean, some general things like optimize the images for Twitter. There's like a certain size that works best for Twitter. We usually save our, really key images for Instagram. We've been doing a little bit of video, but just in general for us, we have, I would say, very specific categories. So I think it's helpful for people to know what to expect from your feeds. So every Tuesday we'll focus on typography, or Wednesday it's something from the wallpaper collection. So just having those key markers throughout the week, so people will come back and know what they're looking at, or knowing what to expect.
Sure.
I call those like content pillars, like the things that sort of define what it is you talk about, and when you talk about them, and how you talk about them. Really,
I think in terms of strategy in social as well, content pillars, I love developing really thoughtful and thorough strategy for people, but I also always love telling people that you can invest so much time in analytics, so much time in strategy and thinking. I think with social, the best way to learn how to do it is just to do it and do it thoughtfully and pay attention. And it's through that sort of iterative process that you learn, you develop an intuition for social.
Yeah.
And that kind of intuition is the best tool. So it's helpful to sort of, if you're starting out, if you happen to be starting out from scratch or from, wanting to completely overhaul, I think it's super valuable to sit down and say, this is who we are. These are the kinds of content that we can push out. This is how we go about doing it. This is what our goals are. But that may change as you start to do things, and to sort of be flexible and I guess want to develop the intuition more than have like a solid plan that you have to stick to. Is the best way to go. That's what we've done at Artsy, and at least I've found that to be super successful. I guess let's talk a little bit about developing social strategy, which is an entire webinar in and of itself.
Yes.
Especially for Susie, I know you do a lot of that. But what are some, if someone is looking to start their social media relatively from scratch, what are the 1 to 3 things they definitely need to do to start to structure their thinking?
And I was I'll actually want to pass this to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I would like to preface it with like 2 sort of key things. One is that sometimes you will find that you will get much better results if you work with someone that is an expert, that understands the tools, the culture, the language, and has the know-how in order to help guide you and help sort of inform your decisions, because you work with experts in every other area of your business. So like, why not social? Like, why just, it's not for an intern, right? Yep. It shouldn't be. I mean, maybe if you have that strategy and you can manage it correctly, like an intern could perhaps support it. But on the other hand, if you don't have the sort of budget or bandwidth to bring on a team or a person, like education is number one. Like investing in education, workshops, seminars, like things like this. Spending an hour of your day is key, and then from there you can start to really take that knowledge and apply it towards thinking strategically about social media. So.
Definitely. I think one of the important things that Cooper Hewitt did for the reopening was we hosted our first Insta Meet, and I spend a lot of time going through our channels and seeing who's commenting, who is our audience, who's really excited about the museum. So for the Insta Meet, I reached out to some Instagram stars and some other institutions, but then also brought in some other people who are just museum enthusiasts who are on Instagram. Also including some members from the museum. So I tried to have a wide range of people. And since that first Insta Meet, I've gone back to those advocates or ambassadors for the museum, to really help us spread our messaging. So I think it's really important to, see who your audience is and interact with them, and then just, keep going back to them so they can help spread your message.
100%. I think if there are 2 things I often preach about when talking about social, one is the sort of intuition and strategy, and intuition, how those play together, and also that amplification is such a huge part of the game, because often otherwise you're talking to more or less the same people, or your audience grows incrementally. But if you can work with someone else who has a huge audience, you just blew things up so significantly. So something like an Insta Meet where you bring influencers together to talk about, especially in a condensed period of time, you can really amplify super effectively, I think.
Yeah, and I think huge audience is one thing, but like dedicated audience is really the thing. Like there are certain people who I will trust over and over and over again, and they don't have a majorly big following, but I just they're honest and they're genuine, and like their word means something to me. And I think we care a lot about that. I think when someone with 4.2 million followers shares something, I'm like, oh, they probably got paid to do that.
That is especially in the art world. I love that it doesn't seem like many people do the sort of pay to play sponsored posts
you don't
thing.
Need to, I don't think.
There's enough of an interested crowd, I think. And often if anyone happens to be looking for influencers, I think it's really important to pay attention, not just to their follower count, but looking at per post what their engagement is.
And who follows them.
That as well. Go through their followers. Because just because they have a huge follower count doesn't necessarily mean that they're that influential. Let me also just do a quick reminder that if you have any questions, submit them throughout, and I'll remind throughout as well, but we'll be looking at them. Oh, you can also, thank you. You can also tweet at us, hashtag AskArtsy, and on Twitter we'll be answering some questions, mostly after the webinar, so make sure you do that as well. Not to cut you off, sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to piggyback on, I think we've been focusing on Twitter and Instagram, but Facebook for us, they've been pretty transparent about how much your posts reach your audience. I think it's like 5 to 10% that actually see what you're posting. So just from a museum perspective on Facebook, we've seen a little can go a long way, especially for boosting an event. I think we spent like $60, and we could see originally it reached like 100 people versus like 5,000.
That's what's cool about it. You can see, you plug in, I want to spend this much money, and it tells you, predicts how much, like how many people you could potentially reach by spending that money. So it's not this sort of black box experience. But
I think we definitely should talk about Facebook ads, because that's a
great idea.
An untapped resource, I think, in the art world. I think with ads, often there's this misconception maybe that you pay money so people will see it and engage with it and do the thing that you're paying for them to do. But I always also like to say that the content itself, you have to think of the content as the kind of content that would perform really well organically. Like, it still has to be something people want to engage with. Just because you're putting money behind it doesn't mean they will. So you can waste money on ads if you're putting money behind like a piece of content that isn't really formatted well or that isn't super engaging. So at the end of the day, no matter if you're putting money behind it or not, the quality of the content matters more than anything else, I'd say. Facebook ads, a question we often get is, okay, I'm interested in Facebook ads. How much should I spend? How do I start? What would you say to something like that? You said $60 behind one event had a great return on investment for you.
Yeah, it's just been an experiment for us because we don't often have a lot of money for advertising, even on social. But we're really trying to target specific audiences like New York City and design, obviously. And we've done a little bit of geo-targeting through Twitter and Facebook as well, which we've seen a ton of response.
Question we often get is, okay, I'm interested in Facebook.
But it's just something we're experimenting with, just because we don't necessarily have a huge budget for it.
Yeah. I think you're not alone in that space. So
I build sort of budget strategies all the time for Facebook, and the way that I approach it is typically to have a strategic conversation about the types of things that are important to share, and the types of messages that are key to sort of, what you want to communicate to your audience, and then the amount of time you're hoping to sort of spread this money across, and how often you might be talking about these key things, and sort of create a table of sorts. Like if we're going to talk about this opening 7 times over the course of the next 3 months, why don't we estimate that we should, pay between like $30 or $60 per post, and like multiply that out, and then you're kind of at this point, and then what else is sort of key, and how much might you want to spend, and for how long, and you can start to shape it just very simply. And then of course, every time you do spend, you can look at how those posts performed, and you can make adjustments accordingly.
Sure. I think an important distinction to make is that, so if you're on Facebook, you post something to your wall, you can boost that, which is maybe what you did with the event, which means you're getting it to more people. I think you can target geographically. If you're getting to more people in that geographic region, if you go to facebook.com/ads, you can also build an ad that pops up as a sponsored post. It'll just say sponsored underneath it. And with that, you can target kind of radically, but you can target almost anything. You can even upload a list of email addresses and make sure that those people see it. It can kind of get a little crazy, but it's all relatively intuitive. So I think, if you're just wanting to get it in front of as many people in New York because it pertains to them, then you can certainly boost. If you're really wanting to specifically target like people who are interested in, Robert Rauschenberg, you could specifically target only those people via Facebook ads. So you have options within ads as well. And when you build an ad, you can also monitor it and change it. So I think there's that fine tuning that is so critical to doing it well.
And that's sort of going back to my sort of number one, which is there truly is so much reason to invest in like time and talent and trusting the experts who know these things, because as you know, Facebook ads and the way that they're structured and the sort of back end to that changes all the time.
That's true as well.
So it's like what we're telling you today could be like different in 3 days. And unless you're in it like we are, it's hard to really track that and manage it.
Sure.
So,
and I think it is important to invest in it and, as much as you can, because if people aren't interacting with your page, it'll just, totally drop off even more. So,
unless you don't care about Facebook and you just care about Instagram, which is also okay.
That's a huge point, I think. I've definitely talked to a few people who have more accounts than Artsy does. I think we're on like 9 in total. I mean, we focus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram ourselves as well. But only put your eggs in the basket that, give you something in return. You don't have to have a Pinterest. You don't have to have a YouTube. You have to be consistent on every platform that you're on. So really be careful, because I think especially in the art world, because often people who manage social don't only manage social, you don't have time to waste. So really think about the time that you have and get the most bang for your buck, I guess. Let me look at other topics that have come in that I think are interesting to consider. Content calendar. So
my favorite.
Okay, this is Susi's question. Okay, I'm just going to say the 2 words: content calendar. Go. Yeah.
I am so in love with creating content calendars. A lot of times, most people don't have a lot of money to spend, so you can't invest in like a robust management tool. It comes with all the bells and whistles, which a lot of like bigger companies have.
Sure.
So you're required to figure out a system that works for you and that is affordable and free in most cases. And your content calendar is your lifeline. It is your backbone. It is what's going to give you structure.
Can we define what that means as well, just for those that might not know?
For me, a content calendar is a system of organization that allows you to have a full picture view of everything you're talking about, where you're talking about it, how you're talking about it, if there are images, where it links to, what the status of it is. It's your sort of dashboard for all things that you're doing and all the things you're talking about and all the places you're talking about it. And everybody has a different way of doing it. And again, like going back to why it's my favorite thing is because I love to design and I love to sort of solve those problems. So figuring out what works for you is different than what works for you. But once you have it, it's just your life changes.
And then there are no questions as well. If anyone has questions about what's happening when, if you want to look at what's coming up to figure out how something plugs in, you then have something to turn to. I think it takes, if there's one thing, aside from setting goals, if there's one thing that you should invest time, even if it takes some time, and is this content calendar idea. Because without that, you're just doing things as they come up, and sometimes that can backfire. So
Totally.
So we use Basecamp because we factor in a lot of content from other departments, and that's our central location where people can put, we're producing a video that's going to be here. We have a publication, installation is starting at this time. Membership wants to send out a campaign on this day. So there's everything in one location that we can comment on. And then I have a Google Doc where I actually draft out everything. So I think it's important to have some kind of tool that you can share across departments.
Sure. We have a lot of different teams that do a lot of different things here, but I try and keep a content calendar going. Often, we also have a really robust editorial platform, and they churn out content every day, all the time. And Artsy also sort of ebbs and flows with the Art World calendar, as all of our calendars do. So if it's December, there's a lot more content coming out. So having a place where I can keep track, also not just of when a post is going out, but let's say you have a major piece of press or a major piece of editorial, you should ideally be pushing that out more than once. So to have an idea of, we're going to push it out this Friday, but also next Tuesday and the following Friday, that helps you see how all these things overlap. So we try and do it. I think it's also important to note that there's no magic recipe for social. We can't just say tweet at 6:10 p.m. and you'll see success. I mean, it's so iterative. Content calendars, you have to just constantly try and keep it as up to date as possible. It's not going to be perfect unless you have someone who's dedicated to only doing that for you, who's really, really dedicated to it. But things always happen. So there's always this need to be flexible, I think.
I think that's a really important point, is to have whoever's doing your social, just give them the trust to, if something happens, like Kim Kardashian breaks the internet. Like one of my favorite things is the Met they reference something in their collection to also break the internet on that day. And I think BuzzFeed said the Met like won the internet that week or something. But I think it's because they don't have like so many layers of approvals. It's just, put your trust in someone to just, go with it.
Pay attention, sure.
But I think also, and again, I'm coming from the agency firm standpoint where everything is so different for every individual person. But I always start with what's your level of expertise? How much time do you have per day, per week? Do you have a budget for anything at all? There's all of these questions that I have to ask first before you can say this is the content calendar that works for you, or this is the system that is going to make sense for you and your organization. It's so unique.
Gotcha. No, I completely agree. Let me think of what else here. Let's talk about this. So specific tools that you like to use, free, paid, what are some tools that could be interesting for people to consider?
Well, I mentioned Basecamp, which is very helpful.
Can you say what that is? More about what that is?
It's basically a project management web service that you can, it has a very robust calendar system, and you can also assign to-dos and milestones for people to check off and just give people assignments, basically. But in terms of metrics, we don't really pay for anything at the moment. We pretty much use Facebook analytics and Twitter analytics. We feel like it's it gives you a lot. It goes pretty deep. And I've looked at Summall a little bit, but we pretty much use the built-in analytics.
Gotcha. We'll make sure that we share also at the end of this any list of websites and things to check out. But we definitely use Summall, which is SUMALL, and they, I think still to this point, they have a free option that sends you a daily or weekly update for any social platform you plug in to them, and it'll tell you, your basic metrics like how many followers you had that week, how many posts you put out, what your engagement was, what your reach was, compared also to the previous week, so you can sort of track, in a really informal way, track your success over time. Let me think of other things we love to use. For those that are interested in seeing how much traffic any website is getting on social specifically, so if you get a major piece of press, if you want to see how your website is doing, if you Google Google Social Media Analytics, I think. I'll add a link. There's a little sort of extension you can install, and when you're on any URL, if you click that, there's a drop down that shows you all shares across social. So for editorial for us, it's super valuable to see, 60 people shared it on Facebook, but it had 600 likes, which means someone influential shared it. We like using that. Let me think of any others. There's one more, and then I'll pass it on to you. I love our tools at Artsy. There's one called Social Rank that allows you to search. It's a little sneaky, but allows you to search your Instagram and Twitter followers. So if you want to know who's following you on Instagram, if they're artists or if they're collectors or if they what have you, you can and filter them by most followed, by most valuable, geographic location, bio keywords, any number of things. So I think that's, especially if you're looking to identify sort of influencers that are already engaging with you, that's a really good place to start instead of necessarily going through your feed and looking at everyone's profile to see who everyone is. So those are a few tools. How about you?
I love Google Docs so much. I think you can do 1 million things with Google Docs if you're creative. They're free. I love Bitly because you don't want to mess around with links that are not short.
Bitly shortens your links.
Shortens your links, so you can fit them into a tweet or make your post on Facebook clean, or you can even you can customize those links. So let's say you have Instagram only, and so we know we can't click on that, but you could customize that Bitly link to say like Bitly / like New York Times article, and then put that into your message in your Instagram post, and people can then easily find that article. I love VSCOcam, VSC, am I saying it right? It's awesome for editing.
VSCOcam.
VSCOcam, awesome for editing your photos.
Yep.
And
I wanted to throw
days about this.
I wanted to throw in Snapseed.
Snapseed as well.
It's
Snapseed is
really
great.
good for editing photos.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Those are the two biggies.
you can Google this. Always up to date social media image sizes.
Oh, yeah.
From Sprout Social is a great. It's a tool as well. It's like Basecamp but different. And it's probably one of the least expensive per month that you can subscribe to. But they also have a whole set of free tools, which includes an always up-to-date social media image size guide that is run through Google Doc, which they currently update pretty regularly. And I love that tool. I think it's really really helpful.
Cool.
One thing I just want to throw in for measuring success is when I bring a report to my director, there isn't like one magic number. Like obviously we want to see upward growth, but some posts will have like so many more impressions than versus retweets or favorites. So we just like to throw in a mix of everything that's going on because sometimes it is interesting to see something that has like 20,000 impressions but only 2 retweets or something like that. That's just, it's hard to say there's like one factor that it's important in terms of measuring success.
Gotcha. Yeah, let's talk a little bit briefly, and then we have so many questions about, I guess, getting buy-in from people. So reporting, which I think can also take a lot of time, but maybe the most efficient way, especially if you don't have a lot of time or resources, to be able to report to those who don't manage social but are curious to know what's happening for your organization. How frequently do you put together a report?
We put together a monthly report.
Gotcha.
And I like to show what the top performing content in terms of what is the most liked or retweeted. And I also like to share how people are engaging in the galleries. Something I saw just from observing the activity is people are really responding well to the immersion room, which is a space where you can design your own wallpaper it's a real selfie moment. So I've started doing those weekly highlights. So I like to also report on what people are doing and how people are sharing what's going on for possible, capitalizing on that.
Sure. Yeah, because I imagine your director, who have you, may not have seen that post on Instagram, but it's good to show them what the content actually looks like. Yeah,
and especially if there's any really influential people or potential sponsors that are coming through that are liking things or posting, it's always nice to know kind of who's around.
Sure. You're the queen of reporting and structure and all of that.
Google Docs, spreadsheets. Well, reporting is so tricky because without context, without tying it back to your objective and to your goal and without any sort of context for why you're measuring it and what those results mean, it doesn't mean anything at all. It's just a bunch of numbers. So maybe you want to know how you're doing every 3 months, or you want to know where you were last year versus this year, or you want to know how that money, how posts perform that get boosted versus posts that don't get boosted. Maybe you want to, maybe you have a campaign and then there's a hashtag attached to it, and you want to see the usage of that in relation to a campaign that you did another. I don't know. You have to give it boundaries in order to make it relevant.
So many numbers.
And I think again it goes back to the sort of initial questions. Step one is why are you doing this, and what do you want to say, and what matters to the people that you're having these conversations with. From there you figure out what you report on and how you report on it.
I think there's a difference between reporting, but pulling analytics for internal purposes to inform your practice and pulling them for someone else as well. So, something like Summel, do something regularly to keep track of how you're doing, really informally, just to get a feel for what might be doing, best. But then I wouldn't be pulling a huge report on, a weekly basis, but maybe once a month do something a little bit more substantive. I love the idea of including examples of what things actually looked like, because otherwise it can be a lot of numbers that are very hard to interpret. So there are a few ways to do it, but it's definitely important to be, I think, informed by data. So.
P.S. back to combine sort of that conversation with the free tools. Iconosquare is awesome because it's free, but you can also pay and get better access or faster access to data, but it's for Instagram. It's an analytics tool and manager, and
It's an analytics tool essentially. Yeah.
Right, you can like
See
things,
who,
you can
unfollowed
organize
you.
things into groups. There's a couple different features.
If you really want, also a question that I'm seeing, and I've seen a few times before today even, if you really want to schedule Instagram, Hootsuite now allows you to do that. I'm I guess old school, and I like the idea of is possible in real time, especially if it's responding to Kim Kardashian breaking the internet or whatever. But there are options to schedule practically everything on social. I think we were talking before we started today about
scheduling is great.
Scheduling and sort of how you fit your posting time into your daily calendar. And my gut tells me, I mean, I do social all day, every day, but I feel like for those that maybe don't, and Greg, tell me how you feel about this, but for those that maybe don't only do social, revisiting social every single day can get a little frustrating. Something I've told a few galleries that work with Artsy is you might consider for the kind of content that you can schedule way in advance, maybe on Mondays, you start your day by lining up content for the week, and then you just have to check in. You don't have to necessarily devote time to sort of switching brains and thinking about social. It's a way to sort of front load social so that it's not that thing you sort of don't want to have to do every day. If you have any tips and tricks about how to manage your time, I guess.
I don't think I have any magic solution there,
Sure,
but
yeah.
we definitely try. I mean, I'm at the beginning of the week do definitely have mapped out for the week what we're going to do on our top channels.
Yeah.
But I think I am a little bit old school as well, as that I post a lot like on the day of as well.
Okay.
So it's tricky when you have limited people and resources to really map out super far in advance.
Yeah.
But I try to do the best I can.
And that's the mantra for this entire conversation, I think. I guess before, as I knew time would fly by, it has. Before we get into some Q&A, I guess let's talk about some specific questions that pertain to different kinds of accounts, because I know we have a variety of people who have tuned in today. So I don't know where I want to start. Let's maybe start with specific to galleries. If a gallery is looking to reach collectors, specifically because galleries obviously, they want reach, but they often social can be a good tool to use. What do you think is a good way to approach that?
Well,
Susie will speak to that.
I think connecting with collectors is different than selling art on Instagram.
Yep.
Just to be fair, but I think that one can lead to the other. Like you may be a collector of a specific gallery, and then you will then want to learn more about them and then find them online and follow them. Or you might learn about a gallery through social media, begin to understand what they do and love what they have on view or within their sort of roster, and then that could lead to a sale down the line. However, that relationship, that connection is what I'd like to just sort of speak to for a minute.
Sure.
So I think these are just a variety of things that are some good ideas in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, but including signage that tells your visitors that photography is encouraged and what your handles are and what your hashtags are that they should use, including social media information on business cards, email signatures, letterheads, checklists in the gallery, wall labels, whether they're within the gallery or at an art fair. I've even seen galleries who put in a very tasteful way social media information on the door, with all their other hours and website and name. Maybe you want to have a conversation or a dialogue with people who were there to, they take out their camera and you see they're about to start gramming, and you can say, hey, can't wait to see your photos. By the way, this is the hashtag. We're on these platforms. Find us there. Blah blah blah. And that's a great way to start a conversation. So you're making both the connection in real life and then, hoping to sort of extend that online. You can organize Insta meets. You can invite influencers and social media enthusiasts to your previews, to your press walkthroughs, and don't be afraid once you made a connection in real life to find someone on Instagram or find them on LinkedIn. And the other kind of thing I think is really interesting is for galleries specifically, you have your gallery account and then you have the director of the gallery or the person that behind the name of the gallery. And I think having those two presences can be great because you can have your sort of personal private relationships exist like within like a private account if you choose to be private,
Yeah.
and then sort of have the other side of things going on within like the public gallery account.
100%. We did some research a few months back now, specifically asking collectors that we've worked with how they use Instagram and what they find to be useful about Instagram. And I'm forgetting the percent, forgive me, but there was a significant number of people that said that they, for pretty obvious reasons, I think, trust sort of insider content coming from a director and insider's account versus that coming from the main gallery's account, because who knows who that person is or where that content's coming from.
Mhm.
I also think more sort of insider content may not be super attractive to a really broad audience. So know your audience. I think I would love to see more galleries have this sort of person account attached to and sort of cross-coded in the main account. There are a handful that do it, and I think I'd actually be curious to know if they see success through that, whatever they define that as. But I think that's a great tactic that hasn't really taken off as much as it could.
Yeah. But the BPS, like the whole reason why this even matters, why this is even relevant, is because there are so many collectors on Instagram. There are so many enthusiasts. That is where the art world is.
Yeah.
So to not be strategic and not connect with these people, it's like, why would you not?
I think in general too, you can't easily be sort of salesy on Instagram, but I think you can, I always say, create the sort of perfect storm where, it's a great image, it's a clear shot, you can tell what the object is, which is a huge trick. It's a huge, I think, challenge in the art world. Two-dimensional work can be very difficult to photograph. You can tell what it is, maybe dimensions are included, all of the relevant pieces of information are included so that if someone is interested, they know what
to ask for.
Exactly, to ask for. So that's a little piece on collectors. That's a question that we get a lot. A question I'd love for you to talk about, Greg, is because the Cooper Hewitt reopened last December, which was a huge, huge moment. Any tips, I guess, for how an institution can take advantage of a big sort of moment of change? So a new building, reopening, major exhibition. You mentioned an Insta-meet, which I think is a great idea. But what else did you guys do?
Have an empty behind-the-scenes tour for Instagram, which I think was huge. It's introduced the new building to a really wide audience, which was great for us. I think, a couple other things we've done is making sure that hashtags are really prominent throughout the museum. Photography is really encouraged, which is not always the case at some museums. So we really try and promote exhibitions. Each one has its own hashtag now, and there's been even talk with curators when they're coming up with titles, like what would translate best for social media.
I love that.
And really making sure that the staff knows what the hashtags are. It's on the collateral. I think that's really important. Like there was a membership invite going out and it didn't have the hashtag. I'm like, well, people, every time I bring someone through the museum almost, it's like, well, what is the hashtag for this? So it's really important that people know what those are.
It might also inspire people to share it because you see it and you're like, oh, it doesn't. It works both ways. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like in the immersion room, if you see it there, then it's like, oh, well, let me see what people are doing. So it's a great way for people to connect.
Let's talk maybe a little bit more. So we're going to start to transition into Q&A. We have a lot of questions, but keep them coming in and we'll find a way to answer as many as we can. Specific to hashtags, how many to use, what kinds to use. That's another hour-long conversation, but generally speaking.
Oh man, for who, for what?
Exactly, yeah.
I
I think what I've often said, let's talk about Instagram specifically maybe for a second, is that I'm personally not a huge fan of using sort of superfluous hashtags like hashtag art, hashtag painting, or if you're going to do that, which is totally a tactic you could use and it's worth experimenting. All things are worth experimenting thoughtfully.
Because you can edit your Instagram captions.
That as well. Something that a lot of people do is, you'll include, and what we do with Artsy is I like to hashtag, artist names, give people the most opportunities for discovery possible within that post. So hashtag artist names, tag artist, gallery names, what have you, include super relevant, like campaign specific or really relevant hashtags in the caption itself. And then the first comment, I tend to sometimes drop in all those other ones so that it's still discoverable when if you're searching for hashtag contemporary art, this post will still pop up. But if you're looking at our post, you're not going to have caption and then block of hashtags. And if you have more than, I think, 5 or 6 comments on that post, then that first comment disappears. So it's a way to keep things really streamlined, but still use as many hashtags as you'd like. Twitter, Facebook, what are your thoughts on
I mean, definitely when I started, I was like, no, there's no hashtag design. We're never using that again. But I mean, something for Instagram, I like to put them at the very end. I think it's just hard to read when they're sort of filtered through. And I'll use something like textile design or chair design instead of just regular design. And I also really try and use an artist or a designer's name, because that's another way people can dive deep and see other examples of their work. So we can reach sort of niche audiences that way.
Sure, makes sense.
Did the deck that you made have different ways of placing your hashtags?
It did. Well, it's not specific to Instagram, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I think just for starters, like what we're talking about is like you have to sort of see it, like to understand exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think because there's so many different ways to do it, and it really just depends on your brand and like your style. Because there's not like one right way or wrong way. I mean, of course, I think once like if it's not relevant or there's too many or it just feels like really kind of feel like desperate.
That as well.
Sometimes.
Yep, desperation's never good on social.
But 2 things I do want to just point out, which Instagram on your desktop, like so Instagram.com, with the new updates to it, if you don't know which hashtags matter, like just start typing it in at the top in the search bar and it will drop down. And now you're starting to see it on your phone if you have like the most up-to-date version, but you can see which tags matter and which ones don't. You could even type in art and then you can see all of the art, like art watchers, for example, versus like art watchers _ United versus, like you'll start to understand the ranking of things and their relevance and their importance. Like, so like when you say textile design is more specific than design, like that's true. And like that will show you like it's in the data. Also, hashtags on Facebook I think are pretty effective. I think people don't really understand them and don't really know how to use them, but I do think that they help and they count for something. And I think hashtags on Twitter typically don't matter unless it's campaign. Because you can find it in the search no matter what.
Search a name and it's going to pop up if it's in that.
Oh, and PS, you cannot if you use an accent, if there's like a name with an accent, like an artist name, for example, if you have the accent included in the hashtag, it's a different hashtag than if you do not have the accent on the letter.
Important.
It's all these little things.
All little tips and tricks. Let me see let me look at Twitter and see if we have anything coming through Twitter. Very basic question, but a super relevant one is how many times to post, how many posts is too many posts?
On what platform?
Let's talk about all 3. So Instagram, what would you say?
I do 1 a day. I think I know other museums do a lot more than that, but I try and keep it pretty special and very curated, if you will.
Sure.
That's just for me. I think Facebook, I think they recommended, just go crazy, do 10 to 20 a day, but we don't do that much on Facebook, to be totally honest. It's really like behind the scenes photo albums, really important events that we want to push. And Twitter, we do probably a handful a day on a good day.
Fair enough.
Again, I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I would say let's just take a week. So normal busy time, exhibition is open, or something in there's normal activity. It's not like August and everyone is on vacation.
Sure.
I would say like 1 a day on Instagram, at most 2 if you have like a big opening and there's something really exciting happening, or there's like key moments, like maybe up to 3, like but just space them out. Also, I would say Twitter, I would go between 0 to 5 or 6 a day, depending on how much you have to say. But I would say like just having semi-regular activity on Twitter is important. Or you can sort of, if you're really good, if it's really part of your conversation, you can also, there is no limit to Twitter. But you want to be careful because now it's like sort of showing you things that you missed versus before. So you don't want to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, because that will change the user experience. And Facebook, like 1, 3, 10. Depends on who's going to see it or anyone's going to see it.
Definitely no more than 2. I think no matter what kind of account you are, typically it's no more than 2. Twitter, we tweet a lot because tweets have, the number floating around is 18 minutes worth of lifespan. It's a very short lifespan, so you have to push out a lot of content to constantly be engaging with people. I'm going to talk about a tactic with Twitter here shortly because I see questions coming in that are relevant to this. And then with Facebook, I think we're starting to take off. We're starting to use the go crazy tactic a little bit. I mean, it's maybe 5-6 times a day. But your visibility on Facebook organically sort of depends. It depends a lot on how many people are engaging with it up front, because if it starts to take off, Facebook will serve it to more people. If it doesn't take off, it sort of goes dead. So we're playing around with it, but
yeah.
What's cool about Facebook, I just want to say like really quickly, is that you don't, for Twitter and for Instagram, you kind of really need text, like at least something. But for Facebook, because you can do the shared link option, you don't, and if you're sharing something that has like a good output to like the visual and the text, you don't even need to say anything even. It can just be like a nice push of information.
That's true. What was the question I just saw? Something about sort of cross-promoting. Something that we do that I think is really valuable for our brand, and I can imagine a lot of people, this being something that could be relevant to a lot of people, is I like to mix up our content so it's not just all artsy all the time. So I do a lot of tweeting. I sort of repackage tweets from other editorial platforms that I think are relevant to our interests and our followers' interests. So I'll repackage the content as an artsy tweet, fully credit them. Often I'll use, honestly, their headline, because they're often good headlines if I'm going to tweet it. And then often that account will retweet us because we're sharing love, and that retweet does so much to grow your audience. So I think, there's a line in something where you can only get love if you show it. But I think if you show love to other people that work in the industry, other editorial platforms, anything that they share is only going to help you. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have formal understandings or agreements with some partner organizations to cross-promote events, but expanding our posts in general, I think we've been trying a little bit to have more of an editorial voice almost. Like we went to Fashion Week for a few things because some of our we have National Design Award winners every year, and some of them were showing at Fashion Week. So it's kind of nice to branch out a little bit, so it's not constantly just about the museum all the time. It's like a billboard platform, or I'll find like an interesting typographer in Denmark, or like another article that I think our audience would be interested in. So I think it's really good to mix it up, like you said.
Let's be fair, though, that takes more time out of your day.
Yeah, that's true.
I think, there's that question of how do I be a 365 conversation? And there's obviously the sort of common best practice knowledge that you shouldn't be like 100% you all the time. But in order to be all year round and be interesting and exciting for, I think, a user, you sort of have to have those two. You have to have other content that isn't yours, and it has to be well curated and well aligned. And I mean, it does take more time.
I think especially for
tools, though, for that, by the way.
Yeah, no, of course.
Could,
if someone's interested in those tools, happy to share them. I think, especially for galleries, I pay attention to a lot of gallery feeds. A lot of them follow us, and we follow them. And I would love to see more galleries, I guess, try and serve more as a comprehensive resource about the artists that they represent. A lot of the content tends to be sort of, every now and then you'll see like great press, or a bio about their artist on another site, or a profile, or what have you. But I think there's so many opportunities to share content about your artists.
Even if you pick like 3, and then again going back to like we're going to always make sure that wish them happy birthday, or we're going to always talk about like an important exhibition that's happening outside of the gallery, or like you can narrow it down. But it should be broader than just like talking at people all the time.
Yeah, we've done a couple of takeovers as well, which has been really nice to get just a different perspective, like a curator, or we have summer fellows, or if someone's going to a design fair, like be the eyes and ears of the museum somewhere else. It's always an interesting thing to do.
I think takeovers are another great amplification opportunity, like we've talked about. I think ideally the person taking over your account is who knows what they're doing, but someone who has a lot of familiarity with the platform.
Pick carefully, because it can also go the opposite.
Often when we've done them as well, we have people send us the content and the captions, and then we can post when we know is best for our account.
Yeah.
Doing a full-on takeover where you give them login credentials, I would almost say never do that.
I cringe just thinking about it. It's scary.
For everyone involved, that's added stress that doesn't need to be there. A great way of growing your following, obviously. Let me see if there's one more question or two, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Unless your styles align, like if they gram like you gram, like it could be cool, but I don't know.
That's also an important thing. Yeah, that they're taking over your feed, but then they should be cross promoting something on their feed. It's not just they're taking yours in that one place. I think we're covering a lot of these topics already. There are questions about timing for, I guess let's do this, timing for Instagram specifically. So days of the week, I guess in general for social, what you found to be days of the week that are strongest. I think for us, Sunday tends to be, which is pretty obvious. People tend to be off and on their phone when they shouldn't be. But yeah, Sundays tend to be big days for us.
Yes, the weekends I've found, and just timing in the day, it seems like 5 or 6 p.m., at least for Eastern time, when people are leaving work and sort of seeing what happened throughout the day, or even right in the morning. I think people are checking to see, when they're getting ready for the day.
Yeah.
I have, with some of the sort of global clients that I work with, I tend to find that the posts that are done super early in the morning, like 6, 7, 8 a.m. are really nice because you're still getting Europe, you're still getting Asia in the mix, and then you're getting people on like East Coast as they wake up, and then there's not a tremendous amount of activity East Coast wise like around then, so you West Coast will still see it because it's not going to be like 1 million posts by the time they wake up and like pushed out. So typically if there's a time where you can find where like a lot of stuff isn't being pushed out, you're going to have more of an experience, like people are going to be able to concentrate more on what you've shared, and there's like less to like, so you'll probably get more likes. Sometimes.
Typically, I've said it's that sort of early morning time, that sort of like getting off of work, at least in the US, so that 5 to 6 p.m. time, and then late night when everyone's on their phone. I think though, for anyone that has an international following that wants to really capture international following, keep other time zones in mind. So often it's that early morning, 5 to 6 p.m. But if you post at 10 p.m., it's the middle of the night in Europe. So there goes that audience. But typically that's sort of the case. I think however much I would love to answer questions all day long, because thank you all for giving us so many questions to answer. Let's wrap things up. And so we're going to continue the conversation on Twitter with #AskArtsy. So please continue to ask questions. If there are any specific to Greg or Susi, I'll make sure that they get them and can answer them. Thank you both so much for doing this. This was really fun. A few shameless plugs, which I'm allowed to do because I'm in this seat. So in terms of other resources, so we did this webinar. We have something called Gallery Insights, specific for galleries or people who are interested in galleries. And we recently launched a social media toolkit. If you search Gallery Insights on Artsy, you can find this, and we'll make the link available as well. But just released a toolkit specific to galleries. We're going to do another one for institutions here in the next month or so. But we're trying to create little resources for people in the art world. A shameless plug on my part is that we're also hiring a social media intern. So if anyone out there knows of anyone, look at our jobs page. I would love to take a look at things. Also, make sure you follow Cooper Hewitt and Fitz & Co. I'll make sure their personal handles that they'd like are also included somewhere in our follow-up. And that does it for us. I'm 2 minutes early, but I'll sign out. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Take care.